Hi, this is Stephen Meade, lifelong entrepreneur, business owner, and global speaker. Over the years, I've read hundreds of books and spent thousands of hours developing what I call the BullsEye belief system. And I've used that system to develop my own companies, as well as help others learn to be specific, targeted, and focused to get exactly what they want in life. Again, I'm Stephen Meade, and this is the BullsEye Guy podcast. Stephen Meade again, back with another BullsEye Guy podcast. Last episode, we talked about the top 10 global events around the world that I like to participate in. Talked about a couple of hacks. And then I talked about the amount of travel and how you actually determine or decide where you want to go. And fortunate today, we've got our guest, Gordon Einstein of Crypto Law Partners. Gordon, yes. Thank you. And the lead-in for that, I think, was probably a little interesting because as much as I think I travel, Gordon's been on the global circuit as well. We joked in the last episode, blockchain sort of started around the world all at once. Mm-hmm. And I've known Gordon for many years. We're going to talk about what you're doing now in crypto. But prior to all of that, when I met you, you had a fascination with learning Russian.
I still have a fascination with it because as an American, there's a joke I like. Which is for an American, the first 10 years of learning Russian is the hardest. I'm happy to say I've completed my first 10 years.
There you go. Perfect.
And the fascination continues.
Perfect. And that's what I said. So when I met you, you already had this interest on a global scene and traveling and things like that. And blockchain sort of opened it up for you. And we're not going to jump right into blockchain. Let's go backwards because you are an attorney. Mm-hmm. I love what you're doing. We're going to talk not only crypto stuff, we're going to talk about some projections and future and things like that because you've been around the world like I have, but you've got a different perspective because you're looking at the law side. So introduction, Gordon, give us a little background on who you are, where you came from, and how you got into law.
How I got into law?
Yeah, let's go that far back. Yeah.
Who I am, I'm Gordon Einstein. I'm a licensed attorney practicing in California, or licensed, I should say, in California, but I have a global perspective on these issues, like you mentioned. How I got into law was I actually thought that when I got to college, because I wasn't good at math and science at the time, that's changed, that I couldn't follow my dream of computer science.
Okay.
So on my Jewish mother's push, I applied to and got into law school and made a quick exit from a Boston relationship and went to USC Law. So it all kind of worked out.
Okay.
And then, go ahead.
No, because this is good. You asked when we started, a lot of the podcast isn't about me or crypto. It's the BullsEye Guy podcast is a lot of entrepreneurial stuff. So the reason I wanted to start with where you were is you said something interesting. You didn't think you could be an attorney. You thought there were limitations. What were some of the challenges you had, not only going through school, but then how you said, okay, this is what I'm going to do and I want to go into law? Were there people that told you couldn't do it? Was it your own limitations in your head? What did you sort of work through to start that process? Because if I go right to, Gordon's on stage in global, we miss the story of how you got where you are.
Well, just to be clear, I actually had an interest in computer science, but I thought at that point in my life, I wasn't, quote unquote, qualified to pursue computer science as an interest.
Okay.
So lacking an alternative, I did what every good Jewish boy does, which is I applied to law school, got in, and then decided to go. It was kind of convenient because I was in Boston at the time, and then this is a good excuse to come back to LA because I went, the USC was the best school I got into, so I went to USC. But I always, like you mentioned, I always had this sort of entrepreneurial business urge. So though I wasn't specifically interested in law at the time, I figured I'd go to law school because the thing I kept on hearing was a JD is as good as an MBA for going into business. Okay. That's something that floats around. I don't know if that's actually literally true, but some people say that. And I took all the business courses I could when I was in law school. The idea being I would graduate and then sort of work as my own attorney as I started some business. Life worked out a little bit differently. I ended up practicing law for a while, several years, then stopped for a period of time to start a cloud computing company called Adaptive Sky, which is still up and running. That was when I met you, by the way. Very good. Good memory. That's right. I was not actively practicing.
You weren't practicing.
It's been a long time, my friend.
You were throwing happy hour mafia parties.
Oh, yes. Happy hour mafia.
Yeah,
that was great.
Good times, yeah.
Yeah, that was... Yeah, I was... You wouldn't necessarily know it now, but I was very shy and had a stutter growing up.
Okay.
And sort of the way I got myself used to public interaction. By the way, I loved the hacks you mentioned in the podcast or the show you just did. It was great, such as going to the front of the line and listening to the speaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was beautiful. My social hack to get myself comfortable with interacting with people was to throw these events, because if you're throwing the event, it's much easier to meet people than if you're just attending the event.
Yeah.
You have a good excuse, pretext, or whatever, just to talk to people and say, at the very least you can say, are you having a good time? Who are you? And you have an immediate subject because, you're at the event together. You're not coming out of the blue. So that's sort of my hack for doing it.
Okay.
By the way, I'm going to jump forward a little bit. The whole getting on stage thing was, to a certain extent, motivated to overcome a fear of speaking. And now I love speaking.
Wow, yeah.
So it's been an interesting road. But just to kind of wrap up the background, I had and have Adaptive Sky. That's a cloud computing company serving law firms, oriented towards lawyers. But around 2014, I'm not an original gangster of Bitcoin or blockchain. I can't say that I knew it. I can't say Satoshi published the white paper and I read it the next day.
In 9, 10, 11, 12, any of the early days.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew about it vaguely, and I was like, give me a break. Another person going to jail.
That's all right. I always thought Bitcoin was a glorified gift card, and I've said that. So you and I were early to the party, but late to the game.
No, I got it. That works.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and feel free to gift any Bitcoin my direction if you feel like it.
There we go. For all the illegal advice you're going to give us.
Illegal or legal?
Legal.
Okay.
Legal.
Well, this is the most valuable free advice anyone will get today, I think.
Okay.
Legal advice. Your advice was great. So just real story, long story short, I met, I think Distributed Lab in Ukraine, the founders, by pure coincidence, because my cloud computing company was displaying at Legal Tech in New York in 2014, right when the war was happening in Ukraine. And these two entrepreneurs who are from Ukraine, we met, we got along. They ended up staying with me in Los Angeles. They invited me to Ukraine, and like a crazy American single man, I went.
Yeah.
And got introduced to all their blockchain and Bitcoin friends. Of course, I was surrounded by Russian. I love Russian. I mean, it was like the perfect combination of things.
Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. And so that was our transition for you, because you were not only out of law, but somewhat. I mean, you were doing technology into law, but you weren't practicing. And then I didn't realize the distributed lab stuff, because when I started seeing you on the scene was with Mike Kostish and Brad and D10E and things like that, which those guys did an amazing job of getting people in early. What was your first impression of, and let's segment it out. What was your first impression of Bitcoin? What was your first impression of blockchain? And then let's move to what your interest in it was, and then we'll start into some of the things you're doing now, which are the fascinating side of the security. So what was your first impression of Bitcoin and blockchain? Distinctively different.
So I like that you're teasing them out as separate categories or topics, because they clearly are.
Yeah.
Just for everyone in the audience and for the world, Bitcoin is merely a use case of blockchain. Blockchain, you can use blockchain for many things. Bitcoin was the first primary example of its use. And because Satoshi's white paper basically was titled Bitcoin and discussed both in the same document, though he never actually uses the term blockchain, people kind of conflate it in their minds. So when I was first exposed to this, I didn't have the technical knowledge that I have now. I went to Ukraine because it was interesting and an adventure, and I got surrounded by the Russian language, and it just happened that all their friends were into Bitcoin and blockchain. I was basically there enjoying myself. But then very quickly, listening to some of them speak, I was like, this is interesting. I don't understand it, but it's interesting. I came back to LA, and over 6 months, I pulled so many all-nighters, I lost count, teaching myself how to program.
Okay. Wow.
Yes. So C, C++, Python, all of it.
Yeah.
So I was running business during the day and teaching myself to program at night and sleeping on the weekends. So it was intense. There's a huge amount of coffee that was consumed during that period. And then I was invited back to Ukraine, re-attended these things. And then I sort of, because of those 6 months of being very intense about learning technology, it was kind of like, I always had a dream to do computer science. I gave myself permission to finally do it. Then I understood what it meant and the implications of it. And listening to them, at first I was like, okay, this is very cool. But then as they were speaking, I had this huge realization, because like you said, I had stopped practicing law. I had the realization that two things, that Bitcoin / blockchain need law. That the people who want to make business models out of these ideas, they can't just run in the shadows. Some of them should run in the shadows. I think there's a place for that. But most of them need to understand the law and work with the law so they can be successful. That's number one. But number two, and this is, I think, even more fundamental, I realize that law needs blockchain. In other words, the things that many people, perhaps myself included, find unattractive about law, it's inefficiency, it's vagueness, it's cost, it's time consumption, the fact we do not have common law throughout the world. Those things are potentially addressable, at least in part, by blockchain. So all of a sudden, law became attractive to me because I saw that, when you merge these things, when you make a hybrid or synergize them, that law can be extremely effective. So I kind of rediscovered a love for the law after several years of not practicing, and it was such a strong love that I came back and reactivated my bar membership and just went for it.
Wow. So this, again, and you pointed it out, Gordon, I like to draw distinctions because you and I are deep enough into it. I think distinctions matter, and I think words matter. Bitcoin, to me, glorified gift card. Now I believe it's more like a unit of gold. To me, it's a storage value asset that I think is interesting. Blockchain runs all of these fundamental components underneath, like the internet. And what you were talking about there is blockchain's going to impact the legal world with everything from contracts and discovery and things like that. There's a lot of inefficiencies that are there. But that's not where you were spending a lot of your time. What I think is interesting is blockchain enabled what are called the ICOs. We've talked a lot about it. To me, they're glorified penny stocks. They're this new, unique way to raise money. They're a new funding mechanism. And the U.S. has these massive laws around funding, SEC and things like that.
Sure.
You've done a lot of speaking as well on the funding side of how it works. And you've spoken at a few of my events, and you're great. Let's back up because you talked about research. You've got some stories about sort of money and the Federal Reserve and things that are along the line that are of interest to the blockchain community about where we think regulation's going. So how did you transition or segue or segment more into the SEC financing side of it versus the fractional improvement side of the law? Does that make sense?
I think so. So, I'm only one person now. I'm trying to build networks and relationships and collaboration.
Which that's an open invitation. Crypto law partners, anybody out there looking to expand with a global rock star, there's your invitation. But keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but when you try to do everything, you accomplish nothing. And part of what I was struggling with in the beginning was having not practiced law for a while. I didn't have a reputation out there as a lawyer, neither positive nor negative. I just hadn't been in that field. So I needed to do a few things quickly. I needed to get myself up to speed, and I needed to be blunt, to raise my international profile so I could start having the conversations and impact that I wanted to have in order so I could get to where pretty much I am now, where people start reaching out to me with things to discuss. Because it's one thing, we can talk about this, when you're with your social hacks, it's one thing to initiate. Actually, Mike Kostash, God bless him, used a phrase with me one time, which is, inbound marketing. You want to work on your inbound marketing, which is being kind
people coming after you. People coming after you.
People coming after you.
Yeah.
It's very efficient.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember, we were together and he brought this up and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he explained it to me. I was like, wow, that's actually a useful life hack that I'm going to apply immediately.
Yeah.
So, I'm very much into monetary theory and economics and the theory of the Federal Reserve and all that intellectual area. But where the rubber meets the road is the day-to-day action of these regulatory agencies, whether it's the SEC or the CFTC, Commodities and Futures Trading Commission, or FinCEN, which partly administers the Banking Secrecy Act. As someone who loves the world, but am specifically American, I wanted to take my newfound interest and passion and apply it to these agencies and what they're doing. And it was kind of funny. Like, I took securities law in law school, and a case that made a deep impression on me was the Howey case, which is how you tell whether or not something is or is not an investment contract and therefore is or is not a security. ICOs were all about the Howey case. So my favorite case from law school, the one case I really remember, that I've always been fascinated with ended up being the basis of my law practice. It's kind of a weird road.
Yeah. So let's back up, because I love the inside baseball for the guys who understand inside baseball, but we've got Eagle and some of the guys down here at Groove Radio. ICOs we've talked about are basically initial coin offerings. To me, I explain them sort of like a direct public offering in stock. But the Howey test, at least for the first, we'll call it first 15 to 18 months of the ICO phenomenon, was, are you security, are you utility, a Howey test? Explain for anybody who doesn't know what that is. Give us a simple explanation, so when somebody goes out in the world, we've provided them knowledge for them to go, oh, I know what the Howey test is. We want Eagle over here, who's, DJ from K-Rock. Apparently, Gordon's a closet EDM.
I am a fan. I'm not even a closet fan. I'm an out of the closet fan of Eagle and electronic dance music. And I had no idea I was meeting you today, and I'm actually completely thrilled. And by the way, now he's focusing in on me. I can see it happening.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to hear. Yeah, it is great to hear. Thank you very much. New wave to electronic dance music. You cover it all.
I do. Awesome. I've been a fan since the 80s. So thank you.
There you
and
go.
Still am.
So give us the Howey test that'll pass the Eagle test. How about that?
Oh, I like that. All right. So let me lay some real basic groundwork, just so we're kind of clear. Everything on the planet is regulated. Everything on the planet falls underneath law, right? But you have to kind of decide what something is in order to decide what law applies to it. Like, I'm holding, a water bottle in my hand. Okay, this is not a shoe. It's not a security. It's not a commodity.
And you're not hyping and promoting it like Adam Gaynor from Matchbox 20 did when he kept sponsoring the water. So.
No, I will.
Which we love, Adam, by the way. Hang on.
I will promote Macallan Scotch, but I will not promote this.
Yeah, okay. So water. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, so it's important to correctly define what something. You use the word distinctions before. Yeah. It's important to draw lines around things, because those lines defining what something is lets you know what law or sets of laws apply to something, because it makes no sense to comply with some law if the law isn't applicable. All right, so with these initial coin offerings, what people were doing was, it was kind of a crowdfunding methodology for starting platforms. They would say, unlike a traditional VC-oriented offering, they would say, look, we have this idea for a software platform. This software platform makes use of blockchain technology. Rather than selling off, say, equity, like stock in the company or convertible notes, how about this? We'll sell tokens to the world. Okay, and those tokens, you use the analogy of penny stock. I'm going to back off that a little bit, though they can be like penny stock. These tokens, when we first sell them, won't be functional, because we're going to take the money that we earn or receive in exchange for these tokens and build something. Once that platform is built, these tokens will be usable on that platform. So this is as opposed to having a completely built platform and then selling software licenses for use of that platform.
Got it.
Okay, so that's an initial coin offering. ICO, of course, they're playing off the IPO, acronym, initial public offering. And maybe they should have, or maybe they shouldn't have done that, because of course it evokes in the listener the idea of a security.
As security and equity, I've joked with that. Why call yourself something you don't want to be classified as? The industry had a blank slate and could have created new terminology and defined it, rather than using old terminology and being classified as something they didn't want to be.
So my general pushback on that one is ICO sounds cool.
It does, but
it sounds freaking cool.
Trust me, I could have come up with something that sounded cool too and defined it where it wouldn't have been in the lane of a security. But neither here nor there. Keep going, because the ICOs do sound cool.
I mean,
but so does a DPO and the direct public offering and the crowdfunding campaign. There's a bunch of different ways you could have gone about it to not be.
No doubt.
In the realm of the security.
Yeah. Well,
and the difference now between a security token from 18 months ago, we've talked about it. It used to be the Howey test. Are you utility or security? And then the new securities are, you're a security which has equity. And if you have equity, that's what I'm saying. It's all this conflated confusion. So let's stay on the Howey test.
Stay on the Howey test. Okay,
so I want the distinctions.
So Howey was a very famous case, U.S. Supreme Court case from 1946. And the idea was, if you're selling something that doesn't fit into a traditional category of security, like a stock or a bond, is it something that's a security nonetheless because of its characteristics? In other words, the term they use is an investment contract. So if I'm selling you a contract, some kind of thing, and doesn't have the word stock on the top of it. How do you know whether or not it's a security? Maybe it's a lease. Maybe it's a contract for a bottle of water. How do you know whether or not something is or is not a security? Is it or is not an investment contract? So there's a 3 or 4 part test depending on how you count them. Is there an investment of money in a common enterprise where the return is fundamentally through the efforts of others?
Okay.
And you can kind of parse that out if you want. In order for the Howey test to be true, in other words, in order for something to be a security, all 3 or 4 prongs need to be true. If any one of them is not true, then you don't have a security. Okay. So now, of course, this test has evolved over time, but not much.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just take the first prong. Is there an investment of money? What if someone works for the thing? Does that mean that it's not a security? No. Of course, it means it can be a security because their work has economic value. You don't actually have to pay money.
Okay.
Is it common enterprise gets really tricky. Is it a vertically integrated or horizontally integrated common enterprise? And there's all these cases on it. And primarily, through the efforts of others has become primarily through the efforts of others.
Yeah, I was about to say that one's a tricky one.
That's a tricky one. I mean, how much effort is required? If I show up at the office once per year and drink coffee and leave, I mean, I made a little bit of effort. But it's like primarily through the effort of others. And so, these tokens now. Oh, and sorry, I left one out. This is actually a very important one. With the expectation of profit.
Got it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big one. It's so big that like almost takes the entire field. So if I airdrop something to you randomly without your permission, do you have an expectation of profit?
Depends on what I'm using it for.
Or did you have an expectation of profit? I mean, you didn't buy it.
Oh.
You didn't. Are you? If no one asked you whether or not you'll receive it, and they just give it to you, do you have an expectation of profit?
Well, it's a tricky one because I probably would, but I think they all are profit driven. I don't think any of them are utilities. I think they're all, but my mentality is they're all glorified penny stocks.
Right. So there's a decent, and you're not alone, by the way. There's the argument that these ICOs are making, which is, people are not buying these tokens in order to resell them later at a markup. They're buying them cheaply now so they can use our platform in the future, and they're doing, number one, to fund our platform, and number two, so they don't have to buy them more expensively when the platform actually works.
Yeah.
If I can buy a perpetual license for Microsoft Office for $1 now or $100 tomorrow, I'll pay $1 now.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it. And people pre-buy commodities at a lower rate.
Yeah.
Just to control it. So I think there's rational arguments for it. And a lot of these ICOs were, first of all, they took a very silly position in the beginning, which is they said, look, these are not securities. Tokens are securities. Tokens are tokens. Well, the obvious response to that is it doesn't, you can call a duck a falcon, but it's still a duck.
Yeah.
If it meets the Howey test, it is a security, even if you call it a token.
Yeah.
Okay. But then they got a more nuanced argument, which is said, yes, it could be a security, but it's not, because no one, we're selling this in order to fund this platform, not for profit. We're not setting up an exchange. We're not talking about its investment characteristics. We're just talking about the platform. I think maybe you and I part paths here. I think that's a legitimate thing to do when it's true, but it's rarely true.
It's rarely true. So let's do this. I want you to turn in the camera and give us what is Crypto Law Partners, so we get a little segment on that and how you would explain it and what you do and talk about. And then when you come out of that, I actually want to look forward, because this conversation of how we test security utility, I don't hear that anymore. The world's evolved into different questions. Mm-hmm. So I sort of want to look at where you think the next 12 months is going to go from the blockchain community as a funding tool. Not all the other stuff, which I'm super excited about, just on the funding side, because there's still a lot there. So give us Crypto Law Partners in that camera.
Sure. Crypto Law Partners is a law firm based in Los Angeles, California, but we do really have a global practice because we collaborate with many other attorneys and specialists. We are blockchain and cryptocurrency fanatics. You're looking at a fanatic right now, and I'm proud to be a fanatic.
Yeah, and I mean, you've been on stage. I've seen you around the world. We were just in Malta, Barcelona. I mean, you were in Ukraine. You've been in places I haven't been, but great stuff. So in wrapping up, we've got 5 or 6 minutes left. For 2020, where do you see sort of this aspect of the SEC still hasn't fully ruled on things? The IRS hasn't defined an asset. Like for blockchain to be effective as a fundraising tool, which I'm super excited about. I think it's an amazing tool. Where do you see the convergence of structured regulation and a global platform, because they're different? The U.S. has a different regulation framework than anything internationally. So let's talk U.S. first and then kind of finish with international on a broader scope.
Sure. And it's a great question and conversation topic. I have to say, unfortunately, the U.S. is not doing well in coming up with helpful guidance that can create a useful environment for blockchain and fundraising via token. The SEC's position has been reactive and fearful, and FUD, fear, certainty, and doubt. And the guidance they come up with is stuff that's so inherently obvious that they're not really giving any ground at all. They're like saying, hey, by the way, this bottle of water is not a security. I'm like, well, thanks, SEC. I think I knew that. And they're not talking about the edge cases. But people are concerned as the edge cases. Everyone knows that bottled water is not a security. The question is a pre-functional token not a security? So, and the SEC has started to come under a lot of pressure because what's happened, of course, is that these other jurisdictions, and you mentioned them before, Malta, everywhere else, they're proactively coming out with helpful regulation. And the regulators, you can come to them formally or informally, describe your model, and they will give you feedback. And they will also proactively categorize it as either, say, an asset token or a utility token or a security token, in Switzerland, for example, and in Malta. So it's tough in the U.S. And it's also tough because something can be simultaneously a commodity and a security. It can be and a currency. And the question is, which law applies? Well, the answer is all of them. Well, how do you manage that exactly? I will say, though, the IRS has been unfortunately, a bit too clear. There's no doubt that cryptocurrency is value, and when you receive cryptocurrency from someone else, that's income. There was never any real question because that's old settled law under U.S. taxes. What would have been great if crypto to crypto exchanges were not taxable. Yeah. Okay. France is going that direction. Many other countries are going that direction. You should only really ideally pay tax when you leave crypto and go into fiat.
And you convert out.
Yeah, but that's not the way it is working in the U.S.
Yeah, and you said something interesting, Gordon. That's what I've long talked about, where I think Malta's tried to do a good job. Zurich is somewhat getting there, and these different ones, is they're standardizing terminology. The U.S. has SEC, FACTA, FINRA. They're claiming these assets are all different names. Right. And so it's hard to have jurisdiction across different agencies where there's no classification of a standard definition that says, okay, IRS, taxes, banking, it's all going to be classified as this.
I think that is a beautiful question. And getting back to the very initial idea that law needs blockchain. Yeah. Okay, this is how it all kind of folds back in on itself. I suggest that when we define these digital assets in the future, it's not going to be humans defining them. We're going to use algorithms and machine intelligence to look at the code and look at the setup and then categorize them effectively.
Based on the coding.
Okay. In other words, code really will be law, despite what Ethereum has tried to do before. It will actually happen this time. Because these objects are not traditional securities. They're not based on, in the U.S. on state law and federal law. They're blended objects. They're sophisticated blended software objects that can evolve over time and not be what they were when they started. If you do a token swap, it may be a new token, or if the network changes, the functionality of the token may change.
Functionality changes, token changes.
Yeah. And then what do? You have to go to court every time and get a definition? Yeah. It's ridiculous. So we need some algorithmic way of describing them. I actually think that this sort of pressure on national and EU, say, if you want to do supranational, this kind of pressure on national legal systems is going to break down the differences between different national systems because it has to.
On a global basis.
On a global basis.
Interesting. All right, so let's do this. Last 60 seconds. What is your prediction if we're sitting here 2021, a year from now? What do you think's changed in the industry within the U.S. in the next 12 months?
I think there will be finally a Bitcoin ETF that's real and being traded.
Okay.
I think A lot of it kind of, what year are we? I think it depends whether Trump stays in office.
2020. You're as bad as me. I forget.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I know. It's like, okay. It's like, Trump has kind of, it's hard to interpret him. He's made noises that are sort of anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin. And there's a good, strong argument for that Bitcoin and various cryptocurrencies will challenge the U.S. dollar's hegemony.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and and there's a whole, I mean, it really is a fundamental threat to U.S. power, but maybe it should be. And I say this as a very patriotic American, because we've written blank checks, or I don't even know how to say it. Like, we've debased the dollar so much and thrown our weight around so much that there needs to be some kind of external check to what we're doing for our own sake. So I think, I understand his conservatism and his fear, but there's no choice but to embrace this stuff. I mean, if we don't, everyone, it's not even if we don't, everyone else will. Everyone else already is.
They're already there.
I mean, China, EU, they're already doing it. We need to kind of go for value and not be defensive.
So that'll be our markers. A year from now, we have this for posterity. That's why I like doing the podcast, because it puts things on video where we're either going to be right or wrong. But
oh wait, you're going to hold me accountable now? Oh boy.
Well, no, I like putting things out there that sometimes may take a decade to prove, but you can at least go back and say, hey, I got that right, or no, I got it wrong. And
sure.
I think you're going to get this one right. I'm excited for the movement. Appreciative of your time. Gordon Einstein, Crypto Law Partners. Again, global expansion. So anybody interested in blockchain, FinTech, he's looking to expand in some of these other primary countries. Definitely reach out. Thank you as always, Stephen Meade, the BullsEye Guy podcast. We will have another great episode next week. Everybody enjoy your time. Start off 2020 properly. Started off great. Big thanks to Eagle and the guys at Groove Radio. I think Gordon and Eagle are going to geek out here on the EDM stuff. I'll go put my country on. But
Groove Radio is amazing. Eagle's amazing. And, of course, our host is fantastic.
There we go. All right. Tune in next week. Stephen Meade, thebullseyeguy.com.